Hello, my dear students. Welcome you all to Sri Jayendra Rank Zone classes. I am your mentor and your friend for the subject biology, and I will be taking the zoology part, that is animal science. My dear students, in the last lecture, we discussed about the hindbrain. We discussed about the different parts of hindbrain and their respective functions. Today, I am going to start with spinal cord. As you all know, the central nervous system is divided into brain and spinal cord. So the spinal cord will be the last part of this central nervous system. Then we will talk about the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. So starting with the spinal cord. Spinal cord, it is present in spinal canal or vertebral canal or vertebral column. It is extended from foramen magnum to second lumbar vertebrae. So it extends from foramen magnum to second lumbar vertebrae. In newborn infants, it extends to third or fourth lumbar vertebrae. Spinal cord is shallow in cervical, so it basically is having cervical swelling, swollen part, cervical swelling, and lumbar region, lumbar swelling, which are called cervical and lumbar enlargement. The length of spinal cord ranges from 40 to 45 centimeter. Its diameter is about 2 centimeter. Spinal cord is present in the spinal canal or vertebral column. It extends from foramen magnum to second lumbar vertebrae. In newborn infants, it extends till third or fourth lumbar vertebrae. Spinal cord is having some swollen part, that is the cervical swelling and the lumbar swelling, known as cervical and lumbar enlargement respectively. The length of the spinal cord ranges from 42 to 45 centimeter. Its diameter is about 2 centimeter. The foramen magnum, it is the part from which the spinal cord comes out from the brain. Okay, so there is a aperture in the skull known as what, foramen magnum, from which the spinal cord comes down. Now, structure of spinal cord. Conus medullaris. It is the last tapering end of the spinal cord, which is ciliated and having a central canal known as fifth ventricle. Conus medullaris is the last tapering end of the spinal cord, which is having a ciliated central canal known as fifth ventricle. Cauda equina, a horse tail-like collection of root of spinal nerves at inferior end of the spinal cord. Some spinal nerves arise from the inferior part of the cord, do not leave vertebral column at some level as they exit from spinal cord. The roots of these nerves angle inferiorly in vertebral canal from the end of the spinal cord like wisp of hair. Cauda equina is a horse tail-like collection of roots of spinal nerves at inferior end of the spinal cord. Some spinal nerves arise from the inferior part of the cord, do not leave vertebral column at any level as they exit from spinal cord. The roots of these nerves basically make a angle inferiorly in vertebral canal from the end of spinal cord like wisp of hair. Now coming to next slide, phylum terminale. It is the extension of pia mater below conus medullaris up to coccyx. Phylum terminale, it is the extension of pia mater below conus medullaris up to coccyx. In frog spinal cord, it also extends up to the end of vertebral column. In frog spinal cord, it extends up to the vertebral column. So phylum terminale is the extension of pia mater below conus medullaris up to the coccyx region. In frog spinal cord it also extends up to vertebral column. Cisterna terminalis. It is the last dilation of subarachnoid space below first lumbar vertebrae. It is a proper site for lumbar puncture or spinal tap, which is done to drain cerebrospinal fluid 5 to 10 ml. This CSF is used to diagnose many diseases like meningitis, syphilis, intracranial pressure, meningococcal infections. Syphilis, intracranial pressure, and meningococcal infections. So, cisterna terminalis, it is the last dilation of subarachnoid space below first lumbar vertebrae. It is just below the first lumbar vertebrae and it is a dilation of subarachnoid space. It is a proper site for lumbar puncture or spinal tap, which is done to drain cerebrospinal fluid 5 to 10 ml. This CSF is used in diagnosing many diseases like meningitis, meningococcal infections, syphilis, and intracranial pressure. Meninges. Like brain, spinal cord is also enclosed by three membranes. In this case, dura mater does not remain attached with the vertebrae. Instead, there is a space between dura mater and the vertebrae called epidural space. Like brain, spinal cord is also enclosed by three meninges. In the spinal cord, dura mater is not attached to the vertebrae. There is a space between dura mater and vertebrae, which is known as what? Epidural space. The epidural space is filled with fluid. This distribution of dura mater and pia mater in spinal cord is same as that of brain. You can see the cervical enlargement, which extends from fourth cervical vertebrae to first thoracic vertebrae. This is the posterior median sulcus. Then lumbar enlargement extends from ninth thoracic vertebrae to 12th thoracic vertebrae. So the cervical enlargement extends from C4 to T2, T1, sorry, and the lumbar enlargement extends from T9 to T12. Conus medullaris, it extends from L1 to L2, first lumbar to second lumbar vertebrae. Cauda equina. Phylum terminal. Phylum terminal, the pia mater extends below the subarachnoid space. This is the sacral plexus from L4 to S3, fourth lumbar vertebrae to third sacral vertebrae. Lumbar plexus from L1 to L4, from L1 to L4 lumbar plexus, from L4 to beyond L4 to S3 is sacral plexus. Thoracic nerves supplies or intercostal nerves from T1 to T12 and cervical plexus from C1 to C4 and brachial plexus from C5 to T1. So cervical plexus from C1 to C4 and from C5 to C10, C5 to T1 is brachial plexus. Thoracic nerves or intercostal nerves supply from T1 to T12 and lumbar plexus L1 to L4. This is the cervical plexus you can see in this picture, which is having lesser occipital nerve, greater auricular nerve, ansa cervicalis, transverse cervical nerve, supraclavicular nerve, and phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve basically lies in cervical plexus. Supraclavicular nerve, cervical plexus. Brachial plexus, axillary nerve, median nerve, radial nerve, ulnar nerve, brachial plexus. These are the intercostal nerves or thoracic nerves, subcostal nerves or intercostal nerve to T12. Lumbar plexus from L1 to L4, then sacral plexus from L4 to S3 or S4. Okay. Cross section of spinal cord. Now, medicines they are injected in epidural space of spinal cord. The medicines they are injected in epidural space of spinal cord. Spinal cord is hollow, single, and dorsal. It consists of three meninges: dura mater, from between dura mater and arachnoid is subdural space, between arachnoid and bimater is subarachnoid space, epidural space, which is outside the dura mater, which is fat filled. Okay, spinal cord extends from first cervical vertebrae to first lumbar vertebrae. Cauda equina or horse trail at the level of L1. Okay, then phylum terminal. Spinal cord extends up to conus medullaris, which is the nervous part. Okay, cross section of spinal cord. Central canal. In the center of spinal cord, there is a canal called central canal. It is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Central canal is continuous with fourth ventricle of medulla oblongata. Central canal is continuous with fourth ventricle of medulla oblongata. Dorsal fissure. In the mid-dorsal line, there is a groove extending throughout its length. Ventral fissure. It is also a groove situated in the mid-ventral line throughout the length of spinal cord. Dorsal septum. It is a partition extending from dorsal fissure to central canal. Grey matter. It lies around the central canal in the form of butterfly and subdivided into three horns surrounded by white matter. Dorsal horn. It is like a horn of grey matter on dorsal side. Ventral horn. On the ventral side of grey matter are horn-like structures called ventral horns. Lateral horns. These are the horns on the lateral side of the grey matter. Then white matter. White matter is present around grey matter. Dorsal and ventral horn divide white matter into three broad areas: anterior or ventral white columns, posterior dorsal white columns, and lateral white columns. This is the transverse section of thoracic spinal cord, posterior dorsal root of spinal nerve. This is the posterior part. Okay, this is the anterior or ventral root of the spinal nerve. This is central canal. This is anterior gray horn. Okay, this is anterior white commissure. Anterior white column. This is anterior white column. Cell body of motor neurons. Anterior median fissure, posterior rootlets, axon of motor neuron. Cell body of sensory neurons, motor neuron, lateral gray horn, axon of sensory neuron, gray commissure, posterior white column, posterior median sulcus, posterior gray horn. Okay, so this is the transverse section of thoracic spinal cord. Now comes reflex section. Reflexes are fast, predictable, automatic responses to change the environment. First of all, Marshall Hall in 1833 studied the reflex section. Best and Taylor defined the reflex section. Simplest form of irritability associated with the nervous system is called reflex action or reflex reaction. It is an immediate, involuntary response to the stimulus. The reflex actions are involuntary actions because these are not under the conscious control of brain. Central nervous system is responsible for the control of reflex action, especially the spinal cord. Reflex arc is formed by the neurons forming the pathway taken by the nerve impulses in reflex action. The simplest reflexes are found in animals involving single neuron in the following pathway. Stimulus is received by the receptor, then receptor with the help of neuron uh, send it to the effector organs, and then it produces responses. So the reflexes are fast, predictable, automatic responses to change the environment. First of all, Marshall Hall in 1833 studied the reflex action. Best and Taylor defined reflex action is the simplest form of the irritability. Associated with the nervous system is reflex action or reflex reaction is an immediate involuntary response to the stimulus. The reflex actions are involuntary actions because these are not under the conscious control of the brain. Central nervous system is responsible for the control of reflex action. The stimulus is received by the receptors, then with the help of neurons, it passes to the effector organ and then produces response. Components of reflex action. The whole of the reflex includes five parts. The receptor organs. The receptors are the windows of the body or guards of the body. They are situated on all important organs, for example, eyes, nose, ear, tongue, integument. These perceive the stimuli from outside the body. The receptor organs are the windows of the body or guards of the body. They are situated on all important organs like eyes, nose, ear, tongue, integument. They perceive the stimuli from outside the body. Then sensory neurons, these are also called afferent neurons. They carry the stimuli from receptors to spinal cord. These neurons are situated in the ganglion on the dorsal side of the spinal cord, gray matter or brainstem. So sensory neurons, these are called afferent neurons. They carry the stimuli from the receptor to spinal cord. These neurons are situated in the ganglia on the dorsal side of the spinal cord, gray matter or brainstem. So the dorsal horn is sensory. Association neurons or integrating center. These are called intermediate neurons or interstitial neurons. They are found in spinal cord. They transfer the impulses from sensory neurons to motor neurons. Association neurons form monosynaptic and polysynaptic reflex arc. Association neurons or integrating center. These are called intermediate neurons or interstitial neurons. They are found in spinal cord. They transfer the impulses from sensory neurons to motor neurons. Association neurons forms monosynaptic and polysynaptic reflex arc. Motor neurons. They are situated in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. They carry the impulse to the effector organs. Motor neurons. These are situated in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. They carry the impulses to effector organs. So ventral is motor and dorsal is sensory. Then comes the effector organs. These are the organs which react and behave in response to the various stimuli, for example, muscles and glands. Now you can see the sensory receptors, they respond to the stimulus by producing or generating a receptor potential. Then sensory neurons or axon conducts the impulses from receptor to integrating center. This is the interneuron or association neuron. Integrating center, one or more regions with the central nervous system that relay impulses from sensory to motor neurons. Then motor neurons, axon conducts impulses from integrating center to the effector organs. The effector, be it is a muscle or a gland that responds to the motor nerve impulses. So it passes like this way from receptor, from stimuli to receptor, from receptor it passes to sensory neurons, that is dorsal horn. Then it passes to association neurons or interstitial neurons. Then it passes to motor neurons. Okay. Mechanism of reflex action. The time taken by the reflex action is too short. For example, in frog it is 0.3 meter per second and in men 5 to 20, 120 meter per second. Whenever a part of body is stimulated by any stimulus, for example, pin pricking, then stimulus is converted into impulse. This impulse is perceived by the dendrites of sensory neurons. From here, the stimulus reaches the spinal cord through axonic fibers. In the spinal cord, the stimulus passes through synaptic junctions and reaches the intermediate neurons. From where this stimuli reaches the effector organs through motor nerve fibers. As soon as the stimulus reaches the effector organs, it is stimulated and that part of the body is immediately withdrawn. The whole reflex action takes place so rapidly and quickly that we know it when it is completed. Type of reflexes. Monosynaptic reflex. This is the simplest reflex found in vertebrates. The simplest reflex found in vertebrates. The sensory neuron synapses directly onto the motor neuron cell body. In this case, the reflex action takes place without the involvement of brain. Monosynaptic reflex. This is the simplest reflex found in vertebrates. The simplest reflex found in vertebrates. The sensory neuron synapses directly with the motor neuron cell body. In this case, reflex action takes place without the involvement of brain. Polysynaptic reflex. It has at least two synapses situated within the spinal cord. It involves a third type of neuron also, internuclear or intermediate relay neuron. The synapses take place between the sensory neuron and intermediate neuron and between intermediate neuron and the motor neuron. So it passes through sensory to interneuron and then motor. The two reflex arcs allow the body to make automatic, involuntary, and homeostatic adjustments to change in the external environment, such as iris pupil reflex and balance during locomotion, and also in the internal environment such as breathing rate and blood pressure. So polysynaptic spinal reflex, they need a third category of neurons known as what? Internuncial or intermediate neurons. Okay. The two reflex arms allow the body to make automatic and involuntary or homeostatic adjustments to changes the external environment, such as iris pupil reflex and balance during locomotion, and also in internal environments such as breathing rate and blood pressure. Polysynaptic brain reflex. The sensory neuron synapses the spinal cord with the second sensory neuron, which passes to the brain. In polysynaptic reflexes, one of the sensory neurons synapses with the spinal cord and other sensory neuron passes to the brain. The later sensory neurons are the part of ascending nerve fibers tract and they have their own pre-intermediate neuron synapse. The brain is capable of identifying these sensory information and stores it for further use. The motor activity may be initiated by the brain anytime, and the impulses are transmitted down to the motor neurons in descending nerve fibers tract to synapse directly with the spinal cord neurons and in most intermediate synaptic regions. Now the types of reflexes. Simple reflex, also known as unconditioned reflex, it is inborn, unlearned reflex to a stimuli. Simple reflex is most protective in function. Examples of simple reflex are simple reflex is also known as unconditioned reflex. There is no proper condition or separate condition is required for its activation. It is inborn, unlearned reflex to a stimulus. Simple reflex is mostly protective in function. Example of simple reflex are knee jerk reflex, tendon of patella is stabbed, also called patellar reflex. When tendon of the patella is stabbed, then it extends or it causes patellar reflex. Corneal reflex or blinking reflex, closing of eyelids. It is also a simple reflex. Rapid withdrawal of hand while buried or pricked. Simple reflex. Quick recovery of balance while falling. Simple reflex. Scratch reflex of frog. Impinged frog with acetic acid. If pricked with acetic acid, scratch reflex. Coughing, sneezing, yawning, they all are simple reflex. They are not polysynaptic reflexes. Okay. So simple reflex, polysynaptic reflex, monosynaptic reflex, and polysynaptic spinal reflex. Acquired reflex. Acquired reflex is also known as conditioned reflex. It is not born and it is not inborn, but acquired and dependent on past experience, training, and learning. Demonstration of conditioned reflex was first made by Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov in Hungry Dog. Pavlov rang the bell while feeding the dog, thus associated the unconditioned response with additional stimuli. Examples of conditioned reflex are learning of dancing, cycling, swimming, singing, and driving. These actions are under cerebral control during learning. So these are unconditioned reflexes. Acquired reflex is also known as a conditioned reflex. It is not born but acquired and dependent on past experience, training, and learning. Demonstration of conditioned reflex was first made by Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov in 1846 and 1936 in Hungry Dog. Pavlov rang the bell while feeding the dog, thus associated the unconditioned response with additional stimuli. Examples of conditioned reflex are learning of dancing, cycling, swimming, singing, and driving. These actions are under the cerebral control during learning. Now comes peripheral nervous system. It is formed by a number of long, thin, whitish threads called nerves extending from central nervous system and body tissues. Each nerve is formed of bundles of nerve fibers, fasciculi, held together by connective tissue and surrounded by a white fibrous connective tissue called epineurium. So peripheral nervous system is covered by epineurium, which is the white fibrous connective tissue. Okay, it is formed by a number of long, thin, whitish threads called nerves extending from central nervous system and body tissues. Each nerve is formed of bundles of nerve fibers or fasciculi held together by connective tissue and surrounded by white fibrous connective tissue called epineurium. The nerve fibers are classified into two categories on the basis of presence or absence of myelin sheath. One is the modulated or myelinated nerve fibers, and the other one are non-modulated or non-myelinated nerve fibers. On the basis of function, the nerves are of three types: sensory fibers or sensory nerves. It contains only sensory nerve fibers. It conducts nerve impulses from sensory organs to CNS to produce sensation, optic nerve, auditory nerve. They are sensory nerves. Okay. Motor nerves, it consists only motor nerve fibers. It conducts nerve impulses from central nervous system to some muscle or glands to control their activities, like oculomotor nerve, hypoglossal nerve. These are motor nerve fibers. Then comes mixed nerves. It contains both sensory and motor nerve fibers. It conducts both sensory and motor impulses. All spinal nerves and trigeminal nerve, they are mixed nerves. Okay. On the basis of origin, nerves are of two types: cranial nerves or cerebral nerves, which either arise from or end into the brain. Either origin is there or innervation is there. Origin means start, and innervation means ending. Spinal nerves which arise from spinal cord. So on the basis of origin, it is divided into two categories. On the basis of function, it is of three types: spinal, sensory nerves, motor nerves, and mixed nerves. Cranial nerves. Cranial nerves, they are named cranial nerves because they basically arises from the cranial part or the cranium part. There are 10 pairs of cranial nerves which are present in amniotes, that is fishes and amphibians. The fishes and amphibians means amniotes without amniotic cavities or amniotic membranes like amnion, chorion, like that. So they are amniotes like fishes and amphibians. They have 10 pair of cranial nerves. Number of cranial nerves found in frog is 10 pair, that is 20 cranial nerves. 12 pairs of cranial nerves are present in amniotes like reptiles, birds, and mammals. So reptiles, birds, and mammals, they have 12 pair of cranial nerves, and the amniotes, fishes, and amphibians, they have the 10 pair of cranial nerves. Number of cranial nerves found in rabbit and man is 12 pair, that is 24. The first 10 pairs of rat, frog, and rabbit are common. The additional pairs found in rabbit are spinal accessory and hypoglossal nerves, which are absent in frog. The smallest cranial nerve is trochlear, very important. Trochlear, which is the smallest cranial nerve. But all animals, smallest cranial nerve is abducens. For all animals, the smallest cranial nerve is abducens, and the smallest cranial nerve in human beings is trochlear. The smallest cranial nerve in human beings is trochlear, while the smallest cranial nerve in general is abducens. The largest cranial nerve is trigeminal in human beings, But vagus is largest cranial nerve in all animals. Vagus is the largest cranial nerve in all animals, while in human beings it is trigeminal. The smallest cranial nerve is abducens, and in human beings it is trochlear. Okay. Vagus supplies the regions other than head. The sensory cranial nerves are. Vagus supplies the regions other than head. The motor cranial nerves are third cranial nerve, fourth cranial nerve, sixth cranial nerve, 11th cranial nerve, and 12th cranial nerve. Okay. So these are motoring functions: third, fourth, sixth, 11th, and 12th. Motor. Sensory 1, 2, 8. Okay. Sensory. Okay. Extraocular muscle nerves are third, fourth, and sixth. So extraocular muscle nerves are third cranial nerve, fourth cranial nerve, and sixth cranial nerve. The mixed cranial nerves are fifth, seventh, ninth, and tenth, four pairs. Mixed cranial nerves are in four pairs: fifth, seventh, ninth, and tenth. Number of cranial nerves in snake, amniote, 10 pairs. Still being amniote, the cranial nerves in snake are 10 pairs. Okay. Mixed cranial nerves, fifth, seventh, ninth, and tenth. Okay. So the sensory nerves, the sensory cranial nerves 1 to 8. Then motor cranial nerves are third, fourth, sixth, 11th, and 12th. Olfactory nerves. Nature is sensory. The origin is olfactory lobe. The distribution is sensory epithelium of olfactory sacs. It receives stimuli from sensory epithelium of olfactory sac and carry them to olfactory lobes. Optic nerves, sensory in retina of eye. It is having largest geniculate and nuclei of thalamus. Stimulus of light is carried to occipital lobe of cerebral cortex. So olfactory nerve, optic nerve is also sensory, olfactory nerve is also sensory. Okay. Then oculomotor nerve, which is motor, crura cerebri, mind brain, eyeball muscles like inferior rectus, middle rectus, inferior oblique, and superior oblique. And spatially except superior oblique, they supply oculomotor nerve supply to each. Okay. And external rectus. So external rectus and the superior oblique muscles. Okay. Trochlear nerves, they are motor formed in between optic lobes and cerebellum. So trochlear nerve is basically formed in between optic lobes and cerebellum. The distribution is superior oblique muscle of eyeball. So trochlear nerve supplies superior oblique muscle to eyeball, and movement of eyeball is the function. The trochlear nerve, it extends from in between optic lobe and cerebellum. Trigeminal nerve is mixed from the Gasserian ganglia situated on the lateral side of the pons. It arises from Gasserian ganglion situated on the lateral side of the pons. Trigeminal nerve is further divided into subcategories like ophthalmic nerve, maxillary nerve, mandibular nerve. Ophthalmic nerve is sensory, okay. Trigeminal nerve is mixed, okay, which contains three parts: ophthalmic nerve, maxillary nerve, and mandibular nerve. So ophthalmic nerve is sensory, maxillary is also sensory, and mandibular nerve is mixed. The ophthalmic nerve supplies skin of lips, upper eyelid, and lacrimal gland. Ophthalmic nerve, it is also sensory in nature, and it basically supplies the skin of lips, upper eyelid, and lacrimal gland. Maxillary nerve is also sensory, which supplies upper lip, skin of nose, lower eyelid, and upper teeth. So maxillary nerve supplies the upper lips, skin of nose, lower eyeball, lower eyelid, and upper teeth. It carries the stimuli from these organs to brain. Mandibular nerve is mixed nerve. It supplies lower lip and skin of jaw. It carries the stimuli from these organs to brain. So both maxillary nerve and mandibular nerve carry the stimuli from these organs to brain. Okay, maxillary nerve supplies to upper lip, skin of nose, lower eyelid, upper teeth, mandibular nerve, lower lip, and skin of jaw. So these are the parts of trigeminal nerve, which is a mixed nerve, which originates from Gasserian ganglion situated on the lateral side of the pons. Trochlear nerve originated from in between optic lobes and cerebellum. Optic lobes and cerebellum. Trochlear nerve. It supplies to superior oblique muscle of eyeball, which helps in the movement of eyeball. Then comes the abducens nerve, which is motor in function. Origin is pons. It supplies eye muscles or external rectus. External rectus. Movement of eyeball. Facial nerves, which is also mixed. Origin is pons. First part is platinous. It is sensory in the roof of mouth cavity, which basically it is not palatinous, it is palatinous, supplying to palate. It is sensory in the roof of the mouth cavity, carry the impulses from roof of the mouth cavity. Hyomandibular, which is motor, muscles of lower jaw, muscles of neck and pinna, external ear. It carry the impulse from brain muscles of lower jaws and neck and pinna. It carry the impulses from brain to muscles of lower jaw, neck and pinna. So palatinus is sensory, which supplies in the roof of mouth cavity. It carries the impulse from roof of mouth cavity. Okay. Hyomandibular, which is motor, which basically supplies the muscles of lower jaw, muscles of neck and pinna, that is external ear. Chorda tympani, which is mixed cranial nerve, which is found in salivary glands and taste buds, and it receives the stimuli from the taste buds and carry the stimuli to the salivary gland. Receive the stimuli from taste buds and carry the stimulus to salivary gland. So we have discussed right now olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, which is for the ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular, then abducens, which is motor, facial, which is further having three parts, palatinus, which supply the palate, sensories, it is sensory in nature, okay, hypomandibular, which is motor, which supplies the muscles of lower jaw, muscles of neck and pinna, that is external ear, okay, and then comes the chorda tympani, which is mixed cranial nerve, okay, which is found in salivary glands and taste buds. It receives the stimuli from the taste buds to carry the stimulus to salivary gland. Then comes the auditory nerve. Auditory nerve is sensory in nature. The origin is more medulla or pons. Then it is having further of two parts, vestibular nerve and cochlear nerve. Vestibular nerve, it supplies semicircular canals, saccule and utricle of internal ear. It receives the impulses from the internal ear and carry to the brain for equilibrium. Very important. So auditory nerve, especially the vestibular nerve, it basically supplies semicircular canals, utricle and saccule. It receives the impulse from the internal ear and carry to brain for equilibrium. Okay. Cochlear nerve. Cochlear nerve. It basically supplies to cochlea, which helps to transfer the impulse associated with the hearing. Then after auditory, then comes glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the ninth cranial nerve, which is also mixed. The origin is medulla. It supplies to taste buds present in tongue and muscles of esophagus. Secretion helps in the secretion of saliva, taste, sense of taste, and proprioception. Glossopharyngeal nerve, which is mixed in nature, the origin is from medulla. It helps to supply the taste buds in the tongue and muscles of the esophagus. It helps in the secretion of saliva, sense of the taste. Okay. Vagus nerve, which is also a mixed nerve arising from medulla. Ninth and tenth cranial nerves unites to form vagus nerve but become separate and divide into the branches. Ninth and tenth cranial nerve unites to form vagus nerve but become separate and divide into the branches. Superior laryngeal nerve, which is motor in nature. It supplies glottis, trachea, and lung muscles. Smooth muscle contraction and relaxation, secretion of digestive juice, muscle sense, that is proprioception, and sensation of visceral organs. So vagus nerve, which is supposed to be combined ninth and 10th cranial nerves, okay, it further it is having the first part superior laryngeal nerve, which is motor uh, in function, and it supplies the glottis, trachea, and lung muscles. It helps in the smooth muscle contraction and relaxation. It helps in the secretion of digestive juice. It helps in the muscle sense, that is proprioception, and it helps in the sensation to visceral organs. Then recurrent laryngeal nerve. First is the superior laryngeal nerve, then the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is motor in function. It supplies to glottis, trachea, and lung muscles. Okay, so both superior and recurrent laryngeal nerve, they are motor in function and they supply to same regions and have same functions. Then comes the cardiac nerve, which is also the part of vagus nerve, motor, heart muscles. It supplies to the heart muscles from brain to the heart muscles, carry information from brain to the heart muscles. Pneumogastric nerve, which is also motor in function. It supplies the abdominal cavity in stomach and lungs. Carry the impulse from these organs to brain and from brain to muscles of these organs. Depressor nerve, it is also a motor nerve, supplies to diaphragm, carry the impulse to diaphragm. Then 11th cranial nerve is spinal accessory, which is motor, originate from medulla. Muscle, it supplies the muscles of neck, shoulder, voluntary muscles of pharynx, larynx, and soft palate. So voluntary muscles of pharynx, larynx, and soft palate, neck and shoulder are supplied by spinal accessory. It helps in swallowing movements and movement of head. Then comes the 12th cranial nerve, hypoglossal nerve, which is also motor, supplies medulla, origin from medulla. It supplies the muscle of tongue and neck. It helps in the movement of tongue during speech and swallowing and proprioception, that is muscle sense. So these are the cranial nerves we have discussed. In the next turn, I will be discussing the further parts, that is origin and passage of cranial nerves. Okay, so please go through the previous slides again. Till then, bye bye, take care, stay safe, stay healthy.